The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not represent or reflect the official policy or position of the Take a Paycheck Foundation and podcast. All information shared is from personal experiences and does not constitute medical advice. We do not take responsibility for any statements expressed during the podcast. Take a Paycheck does not endorse any products or services. Any said products or services mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you or your condition. Please consult with your physician if you have medical questions, as it may pertain to your condition.
Hi everyone, welcome back to this week's episode on Take a Paycheck. I'm so excited to have Nathan joining me today. Hi Nathan, can you give me a brief introduction about yourself? Tell me a little bit about your education, your job, your hobbies, and what you've been up to recently.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm really excited to be on this podcast today. So my name is Nathan Oja. I come from Belgium initially. I then moved to Scotland to study physiotherapy before moving now to Montreal in Canada, where I'm doing my PhD in rehab sciences at McGill University. So I'm a physiotherapist by background, but also enjoy doing a bunch of sports. I'm cycling a lot. I'm doing some rock climbing indoors, but also baking on the side when I have some time, which is once in a while.
That's great to hear. Thanks so much for sharing. So, where did your interest in physiotherapy come from?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to when I was in my teenage years, so a long time ago. And basically, I had this sport injury during skiing, which kind of cut me off from my social life because sport was really a big part of me. And through the support of a physiotherapist, I was really I managed to go back to doing the things I wanted to do, and I realized how much more activity and having the right support at the right time is really key in rehab. Not just can I heal the injury, but can I go back to doing the things I want to do? So this kind of set me on the track of, let's look into physiotherapy. It sounds like interesting. And the more I looked into it, the more I found it interesting. And so I decided to go ahead and move to Scotland to study that. And I was really lucky to find like-minded people over there, and had a really great time. And slowly over time, I started to become interested in learning more about pain. The main reason being that it's weird. It's really complex. And I had this, when you realize that something is more complex than what you think it is, you're like, okay, let's dig a bit deeper. And I had this feeling of saying, in class they teach you about pain, it's quite simple, straightforward, and then you go to clinic and like it doesn't really make sense based on that. So this is where really my interest kind of stemmed for pain management as a whole. I was like, this is weird. Let me learn more about this.
It's so interesting that you brought up, like, let's think about how we're gonna manage the pain or deal with pain on a daily basis or like work with it, because oftentimes when we get a diagnosis, it's so hard to like come to that mindset that, hey, I need to figure out how I'm going to live my life with what I have and the tools that I can use to manage my pain. So just so interesting that you brought that up. And so how did you learn about chronic pain? You mentioned that you do specialize in pain management, but did you just learn about it when you were at school?
Yeah, so it was mostly through my placements. I think that we had kind of a brief class. I would say, hey, this is chronic pain, it's complex, good luck, kind of. And then when we're in clinic, you realize that there are a lot of people that are, especially when I was working in Scotland, the public healthcare system over there has quite a lot of delays before seeing patients. So oftentimes you would see people with 3 to 6 months of waiting, even though initially it started as an acute injury. Now they were in the chronic phase. So it was a lot more challenging. And I was lucky to meet a supervisor over there who really introduced me to the complexity of pain management and really helped me navigate this. So I remember this patient who had basically it was really interesting. She fell and from a shed. Basically, she fell on the floor, got almost crushed by a shed, survived, but now she had just so much pain that was not really based on the tissues because it's been more than a year. But she was still really highly sensitized, and any movement was really painful. And so we started working on, with her on different things that she could work on. And it was not a traditional physiotherapy. We're not really doing, massage, mobilization. We're talking about pain and pacing and all those strategies that can be helpful. And then one time she came up with a huge flare up. I'm like, what happened? Did you move? Did you do a lot more activity? She was like, no, I just saw the company that put the shed in my house. I just saw the van drive by and this sparked the flare up. Like, wait, pain is so complex. And I was really amazed that something that's seeing the company that kind of triggered the pain initially still brought back these memories and really triggered the pain. So it was really interesting. And I think this is really where my interest started picking up. Like, okay, there's something really complex and really fun to look at, and so complex. Yeah.
And so would you think that's kind of because of stress as well and like the trauma behind it? Because I find that a lot of times when patients are in pain, they get really stressed or like the stress causes more of a flare up. And would you say that that's something that you've seen very often with patients?
Yeah, so I think stress definitely plays a role. I think there are so many factors contributing to pain in general, but in this specific case, I think there was just a bunch of things together. There was this trauma around, remembering what happened. There's also just the whole context, things being reminded of these are the people that led to me being in this situation. So I think it was just a bunch of things together that got triggered in this case. But yeah, in general, stress is definitely a main contributor to pain. It depends on the person, of course, in front of you. But you need to really look at the person as a whole to understand why they're in so much pain. And you can't just look at the muscles or the bones moving and be like, yep, that's the whole story. There's so much more. Stress is one of them. There's sleep, there's things like anxiety, depression. There are all those factors, even just environment, context, culture. All of these are going to play a role into the pain experience and should really be considered when helping people living with pain.
Yeah, it just sounds like it's very individualized. And you did mention that you moved from Belgium to Canada. So why did you move?
Yeah, so I was finishing my studies in Scotland. I was finishing my master, and then I was like, "What's my next step?" And I was getting more and more interested in pain management, but also the research, academia, and teaching aspect of things. So I thought a PhD would be a nice next step in this direction. Try to see, does academia work for me? Is it interesting? And I started looking for PhD opportunities, and it was really pure luck that the timing worked out perfectly. As I was finishing my master, there was an offer for a PhD at McGill University that was exactly aligned with my interests. So Dr. Wyman was looking for a PhD student to help improve pain education for physiotherapy students. So like, this is exactly what I'm interested in. There's pain management, there's education, it's in physiotherapy, it's in Canada, it's in a good university, it's paid. I'm like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So I applied for this, and I was really lucky to get the position at the time. So it felt like the logical next move. I had this opportunity. I managed to get in, so I thought I'd give it a go. And so far, I'm really enjoying it. It's been 3 years and a half since I started it, and it's going well.
And how long is this program?
PhDs are quite variable, quite flexible in terms of time frame. It's about 4 to 6 years in Canada. I know where I did my studies in the UK, it's about 3 years. So I have friends who started a PhD after me who finished earlier, but I'm like, this is fine. It's not a competition.
Yeah, I think like as long as you enjoy it and you're passionate about it, I feel like it's fine at the end of the day. You kind of saw the healthcare system in Belgium and saw the healthcare system in Canada. So what were some of the key differences that you saw?
It's a bit complex. I feel that a lot more of the healthcare systems that I've worked with in Europe are a lot more towards the public, which is good and bad in some cases. So it's good because a lot more people have access to it without the need to be working to get insurance to be able to access healthcare, or private healthcare in this case in Canada. But it's not so great because you have a lot of delays. That's the other issue, is that yes, everyone can access it for free, or most people can access it for free. But that means that a lot of people are accessing it. So that's an issue, and that's kind of led to me seeing a lot of patients with 3 or 4 or 5 months of delay from the initial injury to when they were there. So that means it's a lot more complex, a lot more chronic, a lot more resources. Whereas here, I feel like most people that I'm seeing in clinic are a lot more acute. If it's, directly they had an injury, they can go to the clinics a lot easier. But in the meantime, it means that some people don't have access to healthcare because they need to be paying out of pocket and then maybe get reimbursed. So I don't think it's doing a great job at addressing some of the inequalities we see in access to healthcare. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, trying to improve access to healthcare in general. And especially in regards to chronic pain management. I think there's so much more we could be doing for those people.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so you've made a huge difference in the physiotherapy community with your work in developing the National Pain Management Competency Profile. Can you tell me a little bit more about your research and what this is all about?
Yeah, definitely. So this was the work of the full team, so not just myself. Was kind of the first big PhD project for my thesis. And the idea was to gather a bunch of experts in the field. So we had pain educators from all 15 programs in the country in physiotherapy. We had some people living with pain. We had clinicians. We had previous students in physiotherapy. And the idea was to get together and try to come up with what we think would be the core competencies for physio students with regards to pain management. So what do we want them to be able to do by the end of training to be able to manage pain better? Because we know that not only there's not enough education about pain management in healthcare training in general, but also people don't really have the competencies when they enter practice, which means that people living with pain are not getting the best care possible, and sometimes they're even getting stigmatized because of their pain. So really, there was a big role into setting kind of the standard about what we think we should be doing as the first step. And that's kind of dovetailing into the next steps of my PhD, which will be looking at how can we measure competency based on this standard, and are programs achieving it already, or how far away are they from there? So that's really the next steps of the research, and it's a joint effort across the country by so many great researchers, educators, and people.
And so how did your team go about actually implementing the physiotherapy education?
Yeah, so in regards to the actual on the ground education, we haven't done any specific work, at least in my PhD, with regards to that. What we've been doing is working closely with the people that do education locally. And so that means by being integrated in this project of reflecting about the priorities almost in terms of pain management competency, and going through their own curriculum and seeing do they align with that or not. I think just this reflective process has already been helpful to highlight some of the areas that they might want to change or might work on. On top of that, I know there are some people in my lab who are working on developing new ways to help people learn about pain management, be it through seeing recordings of people living with pain, talking about their experiences, be it through first-person experiences of pain and realizing that it's not as straightforward as we think. All this being safe, of course, but there are different ways that we're exploring. How can we help people better understand pain so that they can, provide better care to people living with pain?
Yeah, I think like the lived experience aspect is so important because you get to talk to them like firsthand and see what they've been through, and then you feel like you can really understand what they prioritize to help you know what you should prioritize when you implement that. So I find that like that whole aspect of like the different methods that you mentioned, like, recording, watching videos or like talking to people is super important.
Something that is a bit more local is my supervisor is teaching a yearly course on pain management for physiotherapy students. And he's been kind of at the forefront of trying new approaches to teach about pain management. So being able to help him in that process and assist him and shadow him has been really interesting to see, what are the different ways that people try to teach graduate students about pain management, because a lot of the time you already have kind of worldview, and a lot of the time physiotherapy is really focused on movements, muscles, bones. It's really specific to structures and not really looking at people as a whole. So how do we add this to their worldview right now? It's a challenging question, and it's interesting to see the different ways that people tackle it.
What was the consensus about the requirements needed for physiotherapists to conduct pain management techniques?
Yeah, so the profile has a total of 15 different competencies that are divided into 2 different domains. So there's one about the very specific aspects of pain management. For example, are we able to really assess in depth? Then based on that, are we able to elaborate a treatment plan with the person in pain? So these are very specific aspects of pain management. The other domain, so the second domain, is really about interpersonal competencies. So competencies that are should be implemented across all of those elements of pain management. So for example, this is demonstrating empathy, or making sure that you provide a context in which there's safety for the person in front of you, so that you're not re-traumatizing the people in front of you. Making sure that you respect their own personal story, advocating for the patient in front of case managers, for example. So all these kind of more interpersonal or wider competencies are intended to be applied to each and every single one of the other more specific ones. So for example, it means, can you take a patient history while demonstrating empathy, while listening to the person in review, while validating their emotions and their feelings? And then same thing for a treatment plan. Can you work with them? Can you advocate to the case manager for the treatment plan you propose? So these are the main competencies in the profile. And for anyone interested, it's open access, so you can see it without having a membership, and you can have access to the whole profile.
Oh, that's so great to hear. But it really sounds like it's a very useful tool for those who really need it. And it really touches upon a lot of the important aspects when it comes to like healthcare and pain management and the health system. So like advocacy and all of those sort of things, compassion, empathy. And so that's really great to hear. Aside from kind of you doing your PhD, you're also writing articles, and you wrote an article for Medium titled The Myth of Good Posture, and you discussed the adaptability of the human body. So how would you really advise an individual with chronic pain to approach exercise? Because as someone like living with chronic pain, it is hard to kind of be like, I want to go to physiotherapy, because sometimes we don't want to admit that there's something wrong with us. And also the other thing is like, it's an extra step, another thing that we have to do, another exercise that we have to do. And a lot of us are also afraid, oh, is it going to make my joints worse? So I'm just wondering, like, what would you advise someone with chronic pain to approach physiotherapy and exercising?
It's a really complex question, and something that I see daily in clinic. The main kind of point of tension is that we know how beneficial exercise is for everyone. Or I would say 99% of people. Exercise is going to be really important and really useful for a lot of different reasons at a lot of different levels, be it longevity, health of the brain, health of the heart, well-being, even physiological, being fitter. All those kind of things are really good elements of being active and doing some kind of exercise. Now the issue is that with chronic pain, the main barrier to exercise is often pain. And so how do we kind of overcome that? Because we know that exercise is really good at decreasing pain, but pain is still limiting us from doing it. So it's definitely something really tricky. And I think that a lot of clinicians are approaching this in a way that is more targeted at looking for fitness gains or strength training gains. So let's try to make you stronger, fitter. But that's a bit too intense for oftentimes people that are living with chronic pain. The main reason is that when you have chronic pain for so long, oftentimes the system is becoming too sensitized. And so if you start to just add a bunch of weight, it's just going to shock it further. And that's not helpful. So instead, I think high quality pain management should really start by calming down the sensitized system and tailoring exercise based on that. So it could be anything, based on the person's preference. It doesn't have to be a specific exercise, but trying to gradually increase an exercise that is relevant to them, that they enjoy, and that they already have a baseline for. So we can take walking as a nice and easy example, but it could be anything. We can start with walking and try to really stick at a place where you're not going to be sensitizing, you're not going to be poking the bear all the time. And then after a while, you might be able to increase what you can do slowly and then keep it there, then increase, and kind of have this graded approach to activity. And this is a lot more effective for chronic pain. It can be quite frustrating initially because it feels restrictive. You're like, I can walk only 5 minutes today. That's not really alive. And that's totally understandable. But the idea behind this is that this is temporary. We're doing this so that we can increase our baseline slowly over time, rather than do a lot and then have a flare up and then go back down, which is not getting us any further than where we started. So this is kind of the global approach, I would say, to how physiotherapy can help people living with pain re-engage with activity without having those huge flare-ups.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you brought up kind of not straining everything or going crazy the first time and just like slowly building it up. And that's exactly what my physiotherapist had told me when I was in physio. He was like, let's just do like minimal exercises so that way your joints are not feeling terrible. And even if you can't do it, it's okay. Like at least you coming here and trying to do something is better than doing nothing. And so it sounds like it's the same mindset or the same practice as what you just mentioned.
Yeah, I generally think it's the the best practice for pain management in terms of physiotherapy. You're introducing movement through this kind of graded exposure is really key. And the other element is really about education and helping people understand a bit better what is happening. But more importantly, what can they do about it? And that's really part of, for me, what represents high quality pain management is not only you're helping people build up a plan about what do they want to do and how to get there, but also helping them develop the skills to deal with their pain, but also plan ahead by themselves. So in an ideal world, I wouldn't have a lot of patients because they would be all not cured from the pain. I'm not saying that's something that's going to happen directly, but this idea of being able to adjust and adapt by yourself is really essential for chronic conditions in general and chronic pain especially.
Do you think there is a link between posture and pain?
Yes, but the main thing is that in some cases, posture will increase pain. So if you're already sensitized and then you're holding a posture that is further sensitizing you, then yes, it's going to make the pain worse, or it might trigger some pain. But the issue is that it's not the posture on its own, it's the fact that you're holding it for a long time, or that repeated motions is going to be kind of the sensitizing factor in there. The posture on its own is not inherently bad or good for you. That's the point that I'm trying to get at, because a lot of people are afraid that, I need to, sit up straight all the time, otherwise I'm going to hurt my back. We know that that's not really true. What would be healthier or even better for the body is to keep changing postures every so often. So sometimes I'm going to slouch, forward. Sometimes I'm going to lean to the side. I'm going to lean back. Changing posture is really something that the body enjoys. And we know that there's no one perfect posture to keep, or that one specific posture is bad for you. These are myths that are from the 70s and 80s and have been disproven since. The body is highly resilient and highly adaptable. So if you have to take a specific posture for work or whatnot, your body can adapt to tolerate better. It can strengthen, it's the same as getting stronger as you lift. The body can do the same for tolerating postures. So I think that in some cases, yes, posture will play a role, especially if you're a high-level athlete where you're having a lot of load through biomechanics. You might want to optimize things there. If you're someone living with chronic pain, then some postures might be sensitizing you more than others. So that's important to recognize and adapt. But in most cases, there's no one good posture. I would say, movement is better than posture in this case, and that having joy and not being afraid of moving or keeping a posture is really perhaps a more positive and more a message that is better aligned with evidence.
So in your research about undergraduate students' attitude towards pain management, you discovered increasing positivity for consistent pain management in upper year students. So why do you think that was the case?
That's a really interesting question. So that was my bachelor thesis research project. So my first real research project. And it's hard to draw conclusions just based on that. The main reason being that we compared two different classes, 2 different years. So it's not as if we compared, in year 1 and then the same people in year 4, what's changed. We just compared currently year 1, currently year 4. So it is hard to draw conclusions based on that. And we also use standardized questionnaires to evaluate those attitudes towards pain, which means that we don't really have kind of qualitative data to explain that. But my sense is that a lot of people start to realize the importance of pain management when they enter clinic and they start to interact with real people rather than textbook cases. We're like, this person has pain. Okay, let's look at what movement should I be looking at in my test. Now you start to develop, relationship with patients. You're like, okay, now this is a human connection. So I think that by putting a face behind the pain experience, you're really connecting more with those people. And in turn, I think you tend to care more. There might be also just a selection bias that people who tend to care more are the ones who finish, 4th year, and the other ones that don't really care, don't really like human interactions, might not finish physiotherapy school. So I'm not sure what happens here, but I'm hoping that this clinical aspect of it is really what's making people realize the complexity of pain and the importance of adequate pain management.
Our podcast is mainly towards people that live with chronic illnesses and chronic pain. So what are some of those pain management strategies that you've talked about? Can you give me a couple examples of the main pain management strategies you would maybe give to someone living with chronic pain or even arthritis? It could be super broad because I know it's super individualized to each and every person, but what are some things that you have given to your patients to try out if they live with chronic pain or arthritis?
So as you mentioned, it's highly individualized, but I think as a broad recommendations, the first one would really be to learn more about pain. And that's not just because it's useful, but we also know that just by learning more about pain, it can reduce pain on its own, which is mind-blowing. The fact that you understand something better can already have an effect, even though you're not changing anything else. And so I'm thinking most specifically about the resource called Explain Pain by Lorimer Moseley and David Butler. That's a really great book for patients. It's something that I use regularly in my clinic. I share it with patients. I'll tell them, about specific chapters, for example. And the idea behind it is that by learning more about pain, you can start to entangle maybe some of the misconceptions that they have that influence behavior, that influence treatment. So it might help them realize, oh, actually, this doesn't make sense. And by replacing, some of the concepts they might have had in the past by more useful concepts, is going to change treatment and approach to life. So if you think, for example, that pain equals damage, you're going to be afraid of pain, therefore you're not going to move. But if you know that, which is the case based on science as a whole, we know that pain is not a good measure of damage, but is a measure of protection. Now you can be like, okay, well, we've done the test with the physio or had a scan with the doctor, and I know that I'm safe to move. So based on that, I know I still have pain, but I'm less afraid to move, which means that we can start reintroducing movement and start to desensitize the system. So I think that this aspect of learning more about pain as a whole is really interesting and really useful. And then the other element would be to really try to understand, what is helping you and what is not helping you. It might sound like silly, but the number of times where I speak with patients, I'm like, this keeps coming back and it sounds like it's making your pain worse. And they're like, oh, right, now that you say it, I realize the pattern. So having someone else can be helpful to recognize patterns, but you can also do that by yourself through reflection, keeping notes, keeping tracks, some kind of a journal, something like this. And then through that, trying to understand, is there a link between this and that? And can I reduce the things that are making my pain worse? Can I increase the things that make me feel better? And it could be a lot of varied things. It doesn't have to be specific to pain. It doesn't have to be, putting my hand in ice water is actually really helpful. That's great. Then let's keep doing that. But it could be actually when I spend time with my friends, I don't think about my pain so much. Great. Can I try to do a bit more of that? Or every time, I enter with a conflict with that person or my boss, then clearly I feel worse and maybe my pain is worse. Can I try to mitigate that? So not everything is changeable, of course, but recognizing the ones that you can change and the ones that you cannot, I think is really powerful for people. So I think that would be my two main tips.
Yeah, those are some great strategies, and finding what works for you and also the limitations are so important. I find that if I can't, for example, I can't do push-ups, so I just won't do it because my wrist will hurt, but finding something alternative or, listening to music makes me feel better when I'm stressed when I go to the doctor's appointment. So maybe doing more of that. And so that whole concept that you mentioned of finding what works for you and then creating that change to help you feel better is so important. So thanks so much for sharing that. You founded Physio Connection. Can you tell me a little bit about what Physio Connection is and what motivated you to pursue opening Physio Connection?
Yeah, so Physio Connection is a network of physiotherapists who are kind of specialized in chronic pain management and who provide services across Canada online. And so it initially started during the pandemic because we saw that people were more and more open to receiving care online, not by choice, but still people were considering this as a good option. And just also based on my research background, we know that online pain management is as effective, if not better in some cases, for people living with pain. So we thought it would be a great way to increase access to care for people that are living in more remote regions, who might not have access to specialized care, such as pain management, and provide them with services, access to those services. So this was really the main motivation behind it. And we know, for example, in Quebec that there's a lot of shorting in terms of staff, especially in regards to pain management. And that's really visible in more remote regions of Quebec. So what if the people that have the skill set that might not want to live, on the north end of Quebec can still provide services to people who live there, who shouldn't be punished just because they happen to live in this town. And that was really the main motivation behind this. We know that it works, and we saw an opening for the people that did not have access to the services usually. The focus on online care is really the main difference. We are not seeing patients in person. We are only focusing on online pain management. So that means that the physiotherapists here are really have developed this unique skill set of being able to provide pain management online because they've been doing it so much. The other thing that is different, I think, is that we're selecting physiotherapists that have this experience in pain management. We're really looking for people who have a lot of experience and abilities to manage pain. Since it's our focus, we're only focusing on chronic pain management, rather than having a clinic where you might have someone who knows a lot about pain, but in the meantime, you might not have someone who knows a lot about pain management. So it's less of a gamble for people that have this specific condition of chronic pain in that sense.
And so, what can someone expect going into an initial appointment?
It depends if people have already done online appointments or not, but usually it's pretty straightforward. You can, once you have booked an appointment, you can simply connect on the platform. All you need is a phone, computer, Wi-Fi, and then you have the physiotherapist in front of you. They go through, taking time to listen to your story, trying to understand where you come from, what has happened to you, how they can help you. And then together you decide the next best step in terms of treatment based on the options available. So each physiotherapist has a different approach. They all align with evidence, and that's really something I'm big on. But they will all have their own tweaks in terms of the specific approach to pain management. And the idea is by the end of the first session, you have first of all, you had time to share your story about your pain, but also have a clear line of sight about the next steps in terms of pain management so that you can already start making changes in your life. And really the focus is more on long-term change rather than short-term fixes, because we know it's not the most effective way to deal with chronic pain. It can be helpful, to have a few things that are really short-term but can help reduce a bit of pain. But in terms of long-term success, it's a longer process, and that really requires building new skill sets and developing a better understanding.
What are some of the future aspirations that you hope to achieve with Physio Connection?
We have a few different things that we'd like to do. So the first one is more targeted towards students and clinicians, would be to provide some kind of education in terms of pain management. So that's for people that are looking to develop those competencies, who might not have them through the traditional entry-level training system. There will be a resource that is trusted, that is evidence-based about developing the skill set in pain management. The other thing that I'm really looking forward to building is, I'm not sure about the actual form, but the end product, I'd like to be able to offer services for free or for really cheap for people who cannot afford it. So already taking a step towards improving access to healthcare by providing online services. So that means that people who usually might have to travel to access care don't have to. But we'll know there's still a lot of people that just simply cannot afford paying a physiotherapist. And that's really a big issue. And we're hoping to resolve this in one way or another to really provide care to everyone. That's the idea. And hopefully at a cost that is manageable for everyone.
Can you walk me through a typical day in your life? I know a lot of us don't really know what physios do on a daily basis. Like, we've heard of physiotherapists. If we see one, we kind of know what they do, but no one actually knows, like, is that something that you do every single day, couple days a week? What do you do on a daily basis as a physiotherapist?
Yeah, so I think it's highly dependent. And I mean, very kind of specific or unique context. So, and by that, I mean, I'm doing a PhD, I'm running Physio Connection. So these are really two different things that are happening at the same time in my life. And so that means that in some cases I will do, half a day, something like this of work. So usually when I'm working on my PhD, it's a lot about doing research. And so this can be through reading articles about methods, keeping up to date with the evidence base, seeing what's the latest about pain education in physiotherapy students, for example. Then there's this aspect of meeting with stakeholders, designing research projects, looking at the implementation, collecting and analyzing data before doing the write-up. So these are the main elements of research that I'm involved with. And then, in regards to PhysioConnection, I'm a bit less involved in the clinical practical side than the physiotherapists who are doing this, 24 hours a day, not 24/7, but 5 days a week, something like this. But the idea for me is really trying to build partnerships with people that can help us grow and try to improve access to our services for people that might not be able to access them or might not know about our services. So that's really what we're trying to do. And this is what I'm mostly involved with at the moment. For traditional physiotherapists, usually you would just have a day where you would see patients throughout the day. And since the main role is really about problem solving around movement and reintegration of movement towards function, so that people can go back to doing the things they enjoy doing, they want to do. There's a lot of this problem solving skills that is applied, and every time it's different. And that's really something that I really enjoy, is that every time you're seeing a new patient, it can be so different from what you've heard before. And that's really the kind of unique nature of physiotherapy, is that like, okay, this is a new problem. This is a new person in front of me. Okay, let's listen and let's see what can we offer? How can we solve this together? And it's really exciting. And then when you start to know them, you can really develop this kind of trust and partnership and care, which makes your day even more enjoyable, I think.
I'd love to end off the podcast episode with an advice segment. What advice would you give to individuals who are wondering if physiotherapy is right for them?
My main kind of advice would be to make sure that your physiotherapist knows about pain management. And that's something that can be a bit challenging to assess if you don't know much about pain yourself, which is going back to my advice of learn more about pain in general. It's helpful in a lot of different ways. But it's also a really good video from the Lorimer Moseley research group, which is called Tame the Beast. And that's a really nice video, which is about 3 minutes long, that highlights a bit about different ways that chronic pain is and can impact your life. But it also provides you with 3 different questions that you can ask to your healthcare providers to see if they understand pain to the level that you're needing to. So it's not like a quiz that you're going to be asking your healthcare provider, but by asking them, about your nervous system and trying to see if my protective system is being overprotective. Am I safe to move? What can I do to decrease this overprotectiveness? These are questions that will really help you kind of establish if someone knows about pain or not. Because if you start talking about, hypersensitive pain system or protective system, and they don't really understand it, maybe it's not the right fit. It could be, but it most likely won't be. Whereas if you find people that start to engage in these discussions and answer your questions clearly about pain in general, about nervous system being hypersensitive, then clearly I think you're on the right track. So I'd say for physiotherapy, give it a go, but try to find the right ones, which can be challenging, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Nathan, for coming on this week's episode on Take a Pain Check. We talked about your interest in physiotherapy, your specialization in pain management. We discussed the differences in healthcare systems across Belgium and Canada since moving to Montreal. We discussed the impact you have made in the pain management community and the research as well. And lastly, we ended off talking about the PhysioConnection that you founded and how it is a unique clinic. Everyone like, comment, subscribe, share this episode, stream it on different platforms. I will also link some of the resources that Nathan mentioned down below for you to check it out. And I'll see everyone in 2 weeks on Take a Pain Check. Thank you so much, Nathan. Bye.
Thank you.